Hello, church. Welcome to this week's message. My name is Henry Loke. This is God's Feeding Station. It's nice to be with you this week. It's been a busy couple of weeks here. There was no message last week just because it was a full week. And rather than get you something that was slipshod and not properly researched and studied, chose not to do a message last week. But we should be back into a normal schedule now, at least for a while. And so we continue in our series on Isaiah chapter 2, verses 12 through 17. And we go back to a couple of weeks ago. We talked about how Israel has become what she's become. She's idolatrous. She's self-sufficient, so she thinks. She's sacrificing her children to false gods, on and on and on. And God through Isaiah has warned her about what's to come, right? The day of the Lord of hosts, this day of judgment. And it's coming because God alone will be exalted. We are not to exalt ourselves. We're not to exalt anything above and beyond God. And when we become self-worshipers, when we become prideful, that is indeed a problem. Those that lift themselves up shall be brought down because God alone will be magnified. The Bible tells us it is God and God alone who deserves that honor and that glory. And Israel has relied on herself. And we do that too. I do that every once in a while. You just think you got it figured out and you don't consult God. You don't seek God's will. You think you have it sussed. And that becomes a problem. I was reading C.S. Lewis this week, and C.S. Lewis said self-sufficiency is the poison pill. It is the worst thing, and it must be dealt with. We need to be we need to not be self-reliant. We need to be reliant on God. And so we have to humble ourselves and not resist God, not resist His will. We must submit to His will. And as far as Israel is concerned at this time, if they don't submit, if they don't repent of their sin, if they stand in opposition to God, He will bring them down. How will He do that? Well, Isaiah, we start with verses 12 through 15. For the Lord of hosts has a day against all that is proud and lofty, against all that is lifted up, and it shall be brought low, against all the cedars of Lebanon, lofty and lifted up, and against all the oaks of Bashan, against all the lofty mountains, and against all the uplifted hills, against every high tower, against every fortified wall. Now, these are all metaphors that are being used here to show this is how Israel thinks of herself, right? These are judgments that are going to come that are going to humble them, right? And when we get like this as well, when we exalt ourselves, when we think of ourselves, big, strong, and sturdy, God will bring things to humble us as well. I've seen it in my life. I'm sure you've seen it in yours. But the things described here are metaphors for those who think themselves better than they are, those who are proud, those who consider themselves strong, like cedars and oaks, those that think they can weather any storm on their own, those who think of themselves as sturdy and immovable, those who put their trust in everything and anything and anybody but God. Now, they boast in their works. They boast in their accomplishments. They boast in their strength. Look at me. Look at what I've done. Look at how proud I am of myself and my accomplishments. Right? God will level all these things and everything will be exposed for what they are. And what they are is they're nothing before God. They are worldly things, and the worldly things will pass away. We know that. The Bible tells us that. And the things of the world and the things of God are at odds with one another. And so God will set things right, and His truth will prevail. Psalm 29:5 says, "The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. The Lord breaks the cedars of Lebanon." And in Habakkuk 3:6, he says, "He stood and measured the earth. He looked and shook the nations. Then The eternal mountains were scattered. The everlasting hills sank low. His were the everlasting ways. So God eventually, as he did with Israel, does with all nations, all peoples who think themselves greater than they are. They may have a time that they are in power. They may have a time where their ways are the prevailing ways. But if they are not of God, he will bring them low and expose them for what they are and bring them down to a level that suits them and humbles them. Isaiah 2:16, against all the ships of Tarshish and against all the beautiful craft. We know that a lot of trade was done via ships. And God says, I'm going to sink them. I will sink these ships that are used for profit, just as I did in the days of Jehoshaphat. If you remember that story, how he wrecked everything that was in port. They were going to be used for trade and bring gold and goods in, and the ships never made it out of the harbor. Things that are idols, right? Things that are beautiful, things that are admired for their beauty, things that are sought and owned and hung on the walls and put on display so that the people that own them can take pride in those things. God will strip those people of such things. They have taken the place of God, right? To God be glory and honor only. But yet people buy expensive things, expensive cars, whatever it is, to show off, to be something in the world, to proclaim themselves, again, greater than they really are. God will take their beauty away, will destroy those things. These are things where money has been spent, right? God has blessed people with wealth, and now they have taken these things and spent that money on things rather than do good charitably. And so things that are bought for self-pride and I'm trying to think of the word, just promoting oneself, right? God will take those things away and destroy them. They're hung with bringing prominence to their owners. And God says, no, I am a jealous God and I will strip you of that vanity. It had the word in the notes. I should have just read the notes. Moving on to verse 17. And the haughtiness of man shall be humbled, and the lofty pride of men shall be brought low, and the Lord alone will be exalted in that day. Think of the discussions between Jesus and the Pharisees, how much the Pharisees thought of themselves. And what Jesus brings to the table and to the argument is wisdom of God that shows them and all those who are present that they're not as smart and as great as they think they are. And so Jesus humbles them. We see examples of that all through the Bible. He pours out his contempt on those who are proud. Pride is one of the biggest problems, the biggest obstacles that get in the way of us and God. We think we have it sorted out. We think we know. We operate on the ways of the world. And I don't know how many times we need to say it, but the ways of the world are at odds with the ways of God. Remember how Pharaoh exalted himself before God. I'm Pharaoh. I'm not letting your people go. What does God do? Brings destruction to one of the greatest militaries in the world at that time through that country's own slaves. As God brought Pharaoh low, he will bring everyone who is proud to his or her rightful level. He will humble them. He will show them how weak they truly are in front of him. how feeble they are in comparison to him. All that is of man, that is from a worldly perspective, that is great and impressive, God will strip away. And he talks about how we go back to how the ships of Tarshish and all these things will be destroyed. We've seen what happens when the works of God come into action. We saw it here on the Front Range from a nature perspective, God's creation perspective. Saw it in the flood. Saw it in the fires. We see it in the fires all the time. We saw a big one a few years ago here. Swept out of the foothills and across and destroyed so many homes and so many people's lives. Man has no control over the flood and the fire, and man has no control over the destruction that God will bring to his world when he thinks his world is greater than the Creator, who is God. When we worship the creation rather than the Creator. Self-worship, worshiping the Creator. Worshiping the creation rather than the Creator. That's what we do when we do these types of things. Israel has set herself up in part because of the covenant that God made with her. They think of themselves better than they ought. And God says, no. You don't get to now worship and adopt all these traditions, all these cultural things from these other people when I told you specifically you were not to do that. And if you think of yourself in such a way that you think you can defy me, God says, I've got news for you. I'm going to show you who I am. I'm going to show you who the true God is, and you will submit to me. And I will bring my day of judgment upon you. And we know the story. They are exiled to Babylon. So these things that Israel has set up as false gods, and these prideful things that they have done to put themselves and the nation before God, God says, no, I am going to bring these things to destruction. And as surely as he did that, when the Lord acts, the terror of him removes all human pride and pretension. You think of Job, right? Now, Job acted in a way where he had questions about what had happened to him. He wanted to question God as to why. And Job didn't sin and deny God, but he wanted to know why. He thought he had a right to know why. And when God shows up, what happens? In the face of the Creator, the creation is humbled. And Job had no words. I think I talked about this 2 weeks ago. Job had no words to say. Think of the Pharisees. Go back to those discussions with Jesus. When Jesus humbles them and shows them the truth of who they are and who God is, what happens? They are humbled. They have no words. They walk away in silence and then plot to kill him. See, and this is the other thing that happens. When people are exposed, they resort to trying to discredit or trying to destroy. You see that happen today as well. But God always exposes who we truly are. And that's why we have to submit to him. That's why we have to submit to his will. To be who he created us to be, not who we think we are. Because there but for the grace of God go I. If not for Jesus, I am condemned. And so Israel has forgotten who redeemed her, who saved her from captivity, who has promised to bring the Savior through them to save the world. They've forgotten all that, or they've chosen to ignore it. And God says, no, I will humble you, and you will find out who the true God to be worshiped is. With that, I want to thank everybody who prayed for, had a radio interview and had the prayer warriors here at the feeding station pray for that interview. It went really well. I'll have that posted here shortly. It'll be up on the broadcast side. I was interviewed by Craig James at Just Informed Talk Radio here at KHNC here in Colorado. And it was a really powerful, powerful interview. Ended up, I think only scheduled for 30 minutes, ended up being on for the whole hour. So I want to thank Craig for having me on. I encourage you all to listen to it. There was some, I think the Spirit was moving pretty hard in that interview through both of us. And God gets all the glory for it, because in the end, we're just trying to do His will and spread the message of the gospel. So thanks to Craig for having me on, and give that a listen. It's you can probably skip through the ads. It's available on KHNC, but I'll try to get the audio and post it here on the broadcast side as well. But you can check it out at KHNC. If you look for Craig James, the podcast of the show will be up, and so you can hear the whole 2 hours if you'd like. Also want to remind everybody to subscribe to the video channels, subscribe to the podcasts, download the app if you haven't done that already. And if you want to partner with us, you can do that through the app and through the website as well. If you want to get a hold of me, you can email me at godsfeedingstation@protonmail.com. Should be at the bottom of the screen here. And any questions, any prayer requests, please send them along, and we will get our prayer warriors praying for you. So with that, hope you have a great week, and thanks for being here. And Lord willing, I'll see you next Sunday-ish. Take care. Bye-bye.